Hi friends, this is Leela. Welcome to my channel leelawebdev. In this video, we will try to learn some of the important terminology concepts that are available in the Redux application. So these things you should be very familiar while developing an application, Redux application especially. So what are those Redux terminologies, concepts is? Before we continue, there are some important concepts that we should be familiar. So those are nothing but store, actions, action creators, reducers. So these are the four concepts which we need to know before developing a Redux application. So let's try to see each one by one. So here, if you go, first one is the actions. So what is this action? An action is nothing but a plain JavaScript object that has a type field. So that means action is nothing but it's a plain JavaScript object. So whatever the object normally we will see in the JavaScript, so the action is nothing but an object. But in that object, we need to have one particular property that is nothing but the type. This type property field is must and should in the object. So if any object that has a type property means it will be, we can call it as an action in the Redux terminology. So the type, why we need it to have the type? So the type field should be a string. So that means the value of the type field should be a string data that gives this action a descriptive name. So that means that action which we are trying to create, so if it has a type property means, so that represents the name of that action. So typically in the Redux applications, how we will be naming that action is something like domain name / event. Okay, so whatever the event you are trying to file, so you will be writing like this. So an action can also have other additional fields. Normally we name it as a payload. So that means including the type field, we can also send some other additional fields. Normally we will be naming this one as a payload. So that means if you want to send some additional data to the reducer or somewhere, so if you want to send the data through the action, you can name that. We can also send that one additional field according to the including with the type. If you want to send, you can also send with the type, but type is a compulsory property. Now typically action object, how it look like is, so here you can able to see that add to do action, it is the name of the object, and here if you can see this object and it is having a type property, and here you will be able to see that to do / to do added. So this is the name of the action, and here if you try to see the payload, we are trying to send some random data. It can be payload, can be an object, can be a string, can be a number, anything. We can send an additional data to the action through the action. Now if you try to see, another one is the action creators. What is this action creator? An action creator is nothing but a function that creates and returns an action object. So that means action creator is a function, so which will create the action object. So whatever we have seen the action object, so this function will create that action object. We typically use this so that we don't have to write each time the action object by hand every time. Okay, you are able to understand, right? So each time in the application, instead of writing that same action object repeatedly, so we will be creating a function so that function will return the action object, so that we can call this function anywhere if you want to call that, if you want to get that action object. Okay, so normally this one we will be calling this one as an action creator. Now typically how the action creator will look like is, if you try to see here action creators, so this is a constant add to do, this is a method name, and here it will be taking the parameters, so that parameter, whatever the parameter that function is taking, it will be passed as a payload, and here this is returning the action object. So if you try to see here, the object is having a type field and also the payload. So this function we will be calling it as an action creator. This action creator is nothing but which creates the action object. So that's why it is called as a action creator. Now another one is a reducer. So reducer is a function that receives the current state and an action object. So you need to remember that the function reducer is a function, and the parameters for this one is nothing but the current state, which is a store. So whatever the data we are current state, and also an action object. So what we have seen earlier, the action object, and decides how to update the state using the action object and returns the new state. Okay, you need to remember this one. So reducer, nothing but what it is, it's commonly it is something like function which takes the two arguments, that is nothing but the current state and also the action object, and returns the new state using the, what I can say, using the action object and the old state, and it will return type will be the new state. So if you see this reducer, normally reducers follow some specific rules. So we need to remember this, we need to know these specific rules. What is this one is, so they should only calculate the new state value based on the state and the action arguments. Okay, so it should, the reducer should only calculate, it should only return the new state based on the state, old state and the action object only. So other based on the other arguments, it should not decide. Based on the two objects or two arguments only, it should decide. And it should, they are not allowed to modify the existing state. Whatever the state they are getting it as an argument, they are not allowed to modify that existing state. So instead of that one, what it need to do is, they must copy that existing state into a new variable, and they can modify that copied state, and they can send that copied state as a new state. Okay, so here you can see that instead they must make immutable updates. So not mutable updates, immutable updates. Objects and arrays are mutable, right? So that is the reason immutable updates they have to do by copying the existing state and making changes to that copied object. Okay, copied values. So you can do like this, you should do like this only. So they must not do any asynchronous logic. So that means reducers are a pure functions, so they should not involved on doing any synchronous logic, something like calling an Ajax calls and all those things. They should not be performing those type of Ajax calls and all those things, or any side effects or anything. So reducers will take only the existing state and the action object, and I'll update the copy the old state and returns the new state by updating the new state. Okay, you need to remember this one. And next one is typically how the reducer function will look like is, here you will be able to see that constant initial state is equal to value, and here you will be able to see that function counter reducer. And what is this? This is the name of the function. So name of the function is name of the reducer, and here it is taking the two arguments. If you try to understand, state and the action. Okay, so here it is having the state and the action, and here it is based on the action dot type. So action, as it is an action, so it must and should what we have learned previously. So action must have a type property. Based on the type property, so it is making the update. So it is making the it is copying the existing state, and it is updating the values in the state, and finally what it is doing is, it is returning the new state. So you will be able to understand that. So the reducer is a function which takes the argument state and the action, and depending on the action dot type, it is updating the state values and returning the new state value. So it is not updating the current state, so it is returning only the updated state. Okay, so this is the concept. And now if you try to see store, so this is the store. So the current Redux application state lives in an object called the store. Okay, that entire Redux application state, so whatever the state we are maintaining in the Redux application, so that is stored in an object called the store. The store is created by passing in a reducer. So how the store is created? So by passing the reducer, we will be creating the store, and the store has a method called the get state, so that by using this get state we can get the current state values. So whatever the state values we are having, so we can get the current state value. If you try to see here at the top, you will be able to see that reducer state, initial state, so value is equal to 0. So for this reducer, it is having the state as value 0. So you can have multiple reducers like this, and these all reducers are combined by passing all the reducers to the store, so that the store is forms is a entire big object. Okay, so if you want to get the all store state values, you can use the store dot get state. It will give you the current Redux application state. So if you try to see here, another one we need to understand is the dispatch. What is this dispatch? Is the Redux store has a method called dispatch. So the store, instead we also saw that. So if you want to get the current state, we can use this store.get state. In the same scenario, if you want to update the state in the data, so you will be having a method called store.dispatch. So dispatch will take the action object. Okay, you need to understand that this is a type, it is the object is having a type property, so that means it is an action object. So it will, the dispatch we need to send the action object to the dispatch method. So the only way to update the state is to call the store.dispatch. So in order to update the state means we need to call the store.dispatch by sending the action object. If you try to see the dispatch, how it will look like is, so top we are having an action creator with the name increment. So this is the action creator. The action creator is nothing but it is a function which returns the action object. So it is returning the action object, and type should be a mandatory field, and the payload is a not mandatory, it's an optional field. So if you want to send the payload, extra payload, you can send it. and here we are calling store.dispatch of this increment method we are calling, so that this increment method will returns the action object. And here if you want to get the updated state, you can get the store.getState. So this is all about the terminology. So you need to understand about these all. So action creators, store, reducer, and also the dispatch. So these are the things you need to remember. So while we are developing Redux applications, we will be using these all the terminology and concepts, and we will be developing an application. And if you see outside, if you see any articles or anything, so these are all the common terminologies which you will be coming across, so that you will be able to understand. If you are able to understand these all the concepts. So typically now what we'll try to do is we'll try to see the diagram how the flow will be in the Redux application. If you go to the Redux website, and here you will be able to see the graphical representation, so something like a GIF representation. So GIF representation, here you will be able to see that UI. If you want to update the deposit, something like that, you will be sending an event through the UI, and here in the event handler you are sending an action object with the payload as 10, and here in the reducer, so when you are sending the action through the dispatch, and here in the reducer it will be get updated, and you will be able to send the new state to the UI, so that the new state will be updated. So here the UI is sending an action through the, or we can send the action through the dispatch method, and this action is sent to the reducer depending on the conditions and all those things. So you will be updating the state in the reducer, and you will send that new state automatically to the UI using the store.getState. So this is the typical representation of the Redux application. So this is how the Redux application works. So in the next video, what we will try to do is we will try to implement the Redux application using these all the concepts. How we can update the state, we'll try to see. Okay, if you have any doubts or any suggestions, please post the comments below to this video. And if you like this video, please do support me by subscribing to my channel. Thank you.